Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Sorry to interrupt your conversations. There are a few more seats down in the front for those who would like to find a chair. My name is Ashley Muller, and I work for the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and I will be your MC this evening to make sure that the evening goes smoothly and that all of your needs are taken care of. So I will start first with the housekeeping, which are the toilets and the emergency exits. So the toilets are just out to the back. If you take a left down the stairs, you'll find them there. Emergency exits can be found behind me. Don't run me over. I might go first, but then you guys can take the back one over there. So I would like to just quickly go through the evening before we get started. First, a warm welcome to all of you. Our jury who helped decide the winning team this evening, as well as colleagues and people from around Geneva and around the world, as well as our winning team who you will get a chance to meet later on. I have had the privilege to be in this position last year as well, and if you were here last year, you will have been a part of our digital conversation on Twitter. So you'll see up there at the top left our GCSP Twitter handle and the hashtag if you would like to join the conversation or ask questions, take pictures, and allow those who cannot be with us this evening to join the conversation. You will need to connect to the Wi-Fi in order to do so, as you may notice that you may not have service in this room. So we are here this evening to celebrate the winning team of the 2019 Prize for Innovation and Global Security at the GCSP, brought to you by the Geopolitics and Global Futures program and Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan. So I would like to briefly run through the program for you. We will start with a welcoming remark by Ambassador Christian Dussey, then some ideas behind the concept of the Innovation Prize from Professor Al-Rodhan, and our keynote speaker tonight, who will be here to talk to us about governance of emerging technologies to mitigate negative security consequences. And then we will have a chance to win, you will have the chance to win a prize. So if any of you saw at the back a chance for you to drop your business card, if you missed out, very sorry, but three of you will have a chance to win a prize this evening. And then our mighty awards ceremony, where you will get to meet the winners of the prize. So, thank you all for being here. If you could put your phones on silent, even though there may not be any service down here, I would just invite you to do so. And without further ado, Ambassador Dussey, Director of the GCSP. Thank you.
Okay, good evening everyone. Thank you very much, Ashley. Bienvenue à la Maison de la Paix. Welcome to the House of Peace here in Geneva. It's a place where we do research, where we do dialogue, and also a place for action. And we are very happy to welcome you to the 5th edition of the Global Prize for Innovation in Global Security. When we look at the world now, we can consider that there are two fundamental shifts. On one hand, we have an increase in the complexity, range, and immediacy of issues. And on the other, we have an unprecedented pace of technological changes. And to face those challenges, innovation, creativity, innovation is key. And this is why we have started with Professor Al-Rodhan 5 years ago, these prizes, because we want to encourage the project from all over the world who are going and helping us move in the right direction and help create a safer world. This year, we have received 181 projects coming from all over the world, and 80 of these projects came from Africa. So this is good. Africa are the top on the rankings, and we will do a ranking every year to see how we can reach also globally and what kind of countries and continent can bring the most to us. It's important to us because all GCSP was a byproduct of the very first summit here in Geneva. Some of you might remember in November 1985, this was the very first meeting between President Reagan of the United States and Chairman Gorbachev of the USSR. It was a leap of faith, and the Swiss Confederation decided to quickly build up its capacities, the capacities of its diplomats, and military officers in the field of international security, arms control, disarmament. And this is why GCSP was created, the first core of GCSP. Then it has exploded into an organization that delivers now 80 courses a year and more than 150 events, public discussion, diplomatic facilitation. But the novelty is that we also try to be innovative. So GCSP was a foundation that was a bit dormant for many years, but it has transformed itself into a startup. And now the startup is generating new startups because we have created a new incubator, and this incubator is taking the project that we see here on that we've received over the past months and helping them transform, incubate them, and accelerate them so they can have a larger impact. I wish you all a very nice evening, and now it's my pleasure to give back the floor to you, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Right, so we'll quickly jump as we are already a few minutes delayed, and that's my job, is to keep us on track. So I would give a warm welcome to Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan, the head of the Geopolitics and Global Futures program here at the GCSP, as well as an honorary fellow at St. Antony's College in Oxford. Professor.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Ambassador. Initially, I want to thank a few people and then maybe explain the conceptual foundations of what we do in our program and thus the need to innovate in global security, given the changing nature of global order, primarily because of the advent of instant connectivity and deepening interdependence. So the thanks first, which is more important. Start with Ambassador Dussey, who's our innovation leader. He has enabled what I do in the program to be real, and part of that exercise was this prize, and I'm very grateful to him. I'm also grateful to the jury, who work extremely hard. We're a little kind to you because we receive 181. We look at them, we only give you 15 to look at. But that's a lot of work in itself, and I'm very grateful for your diligence. My team, Christine, Loana, Miriam, and Eugenia, and of course Ashley and her team. Thank you all for making this happen. I'm very pleased on this 5th edition of the prize to have such attendance and such diversity. I'm going to shock you a little bit in terms of what we do and take home some messages. While we recognize that global security, to most people, global security is the collection of successive national securities of various states. And that is true. The state and its national security remains the most pivotal unitary act in the global system. There's no question about that, at least for the foreseeable future. I suspect that will change. But a few years ago, we decided to divide global security in a monograph into 5 dimensions, which we call the 5 dimensions of global security. So national security, yes. Human security. Transnational security, of course, because of cyber and everything else and transnational crime. Environmental security, long before it was popular. And critically, transcultural security. And I deliberately picked that name of transculture rather than interculture because of the way human history has evolved. And we also advocated what I call the multi-sum security principle. And I said in that in a globalized world of connectivity, instant connectivity specifically, and deepening interdependence, no state will be able to be secure if every other state is not secure. And nobody, no matter how distant, different, or dysfunctional, must be left behind. You just can't do it, especially enabled by technology. So in our program, we work on 3 things, and they're all semi-innovative. Because of my background as a neuroscientist, Mayo Clinic, Yale, Harvard, and then I lost my way and then ended up in political philosophy and global security. But I bring that baggage with me in a positive way, I think. And so the idea, and political theorists throughout human history have always had a very specific view of human nature. And that is pivotal to international relations studies, pivotal to war and peace. And our view of human nature is one of what we call emotional, amoral egoism. So it turns out, actually, from a neuroscientific standpoint, that we are far more emotional than we think. But there's a caveat. It turns out that this emotionality is not this kind of nonsensical remnant of our evolutionary past. It turns out, actually, from what we call the association cortex, that it's actually involved in the most rational decisions that we make. Emotionality. So don't frown upon it, because it's really central to being rational. And we are at best, I'm sorry to bust your bubble, but at best we're amoral creatures. I don't necessarily we're immoral, but we're not necessarily moral. And it turns out that our moral compass is governed primarily by our perceived emotional self-interest. And perception, the prefix of perception, is absolutely critical, because you can perceive incorrectly and sabotage the very self-interest or national interest you think you aspire to achieve. And of course, egoism is collective self-interest or your own self-interest. We look at, that's neurophilosophy, we look at transformative technology, and the three that we're interested in is AI, of course, machine learning, synthetic biology, which is going to be profoundly consequential, I think, for all of our lives, and big data, and which we call colossal data. It's no longer big, and of course the challenge there is really, the issue is really, how do we allow the state to keep us all secure by knowing what it needs to know, versus privacy and civil liberty. I submit to you that privacy is dead. May it rest in peace. Civil liberty is in the ICU, I think, is in trouble. It's not quite dead, but I think it's suffering severely, and we must all safeguard that with everything we have, because if we lose that, we're in big trouble. And then space security, which is central to what we do, for a number of reasons. One, space security is heavily intertwined with terrestrial security, number one. Number two, it turns out that conventional military superiority on Earth is highly dependent on space assets. So you couldn't really do much without. But there's a great deal of junk up there in terms of space debris. And we need a lot of innovation and money and technology to deal with that. But there's very little effort. There's some effort, but that's not enough. And of course, weaponization of space. Most of you have seen the idea of the Space Command by the US, which was announced a few months back. The French then jumped on board, and they announced their own ideas of weaponizing space. And NATO, I'm going to Oxford next week, and NATO will be in London to look at, for the first time ever, assign the space domain as a war domain. I mean, that is extremely worrying. It's understandable, but it's extremely concerning, I think. So the idea of weaponizing space and not taking care of space debris will be extremely consequential for humanity, because we're highly dependent in an irreversible way on space for everything we do, more than you know. And if it becomes obsolete because of junk or adventurous militarism, then it will set back civilization, I think, significantly. So just to leave you home with some messages that are, I think, interesting, curious, but worthwhile. Quantum computing, which is central to what we look at. You may have, on October 23rd, which is 3 weeks ago, in the journal Nature, which is the journal, Google announced what they called quantum supremacy. I'm sure some of you may have seen that. What they mean by that is they've achieved quantum computing level. Now, as you know, quantum computing compared to regular computing, or even what we call neuromorphic computing, i.e. brain-like computing, is very different. IBM, of course, challenged that because they're working on the same thing, that they challenged the nomenclature. But what they claimed in that article is that that computer can do calculations in one day that the greatest supercomputer existing out there will need 10,000 years to do. Think about that. And there was an editorial by the director of the Los Alamos lab, who immediately thereafter, who said that whoever gets there first in terms of quantum supremacy, quantum computing, real quantum computing, will absolutely be in charge of future global security and global economics. So it's a real challenge. It's the ultimate race. So that's quantum computing. Remember, your brain, again, from a human security standpoint, and the use of AI in terms of, there's a lot of literature lately in terms of human resources, in terms of hiring people, in terms of emotional, what we call biometrics of intent. The idea you can look at somebody remotely and figure out their emotional well-being and also their intent, which is a disaster. But there's a lot of money being thrown at that. And I think that's dangerous because of the civil liberty issue I talked about. Now, it turns out it takes 170 milliseconds for your brain to recognize somebody as the other. And that's a primordial evolutionary remnant which we needed badly historically for survival. So that's not a bad thing. There is some good news in that. The good news is what happens after that is all learned. So what you do with the recognizing of the other is what your societal frameworks, your cultural framework, your parenting, your entertainment industry, your electioneering sound bites, all of that actually influences that instant recognition. The other thing that's really interesting and a take-home message is that your brain decides, and that has to do with free will and the neurophilosophy of free will, but it's relevant to security. Your brain decides what you will do 7 seconds before you know it. We know that from functional MRI imaging. So actually, which means the decision is really the result of 86 billion neurons that you and I hopefully have. But the decision is actually neurochemical and cellular and subcellular. So it's not really, the psychology is the endpoint. So a lot of it is so everything you're exposed to, interestingly, and that's real innovation because of the imaging, everything you're exposed to influences you without knowing, for good or for ill. So I think you have to be careful what you expose yourself to. Ashley will be hugely mad at me, so I think I better stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nayef. So before our next speaker, our keynote speaker, comes up, I would like to give a short introduction. So you are briefed before you hear from him. I would like to give a short introduction to Dr. Amandeep Gill, leader of the International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative. Dr. Gill leads the International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative, a multi-stakeholder initiative in follow-up to the UN Secretary-General's high-level panel on digital cooperation. Prior to serving the UNSG panel, as executive director, he was India's ambassador and PR to the Conference on Disarmament. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1992 and served abroad at the Indian missions in Tehran, Colombo, and Geneva. From 2013 to 2016, he served as head of the Disarmament and International Security Affairs Division in India's Ministry of External Affairs. There are many other impressive aspects to Dr. Gill. We'll let you hear for yourself. So without further ado, Dr. Gill.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Ashley. Ambassador Dussey, Christian, dear friends at the GCSP. the jury and the winners of the Innovation Prize. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some thoughts on the intersection of technology and security. You heard from Nayef some examples of technologies that are being mentioned in the headlines. The interesting thing is that this is not new. Technology has been with us from the very beginning. So I wanted to start today's talk with an image from the medieval ages, from the 11th century. This is a crossbow, and it shot bolts, like you've heard of the bolt from the blue. And what it did was, it allowed peasants with a few weeks of training to take on knights with protective armor, with cavalry, mounted cavalry. And it sort of flattened the playing field between the elite, the fighting elite of that time, and ordinary people. So much so that there was a governance reaction to it. And Pope Urban II in 1096 decreed this weapon to be illegal. So it could not be used by Christians against Christians. Of course, you could use it in other contexts. But those were the days of that kind of a notion in warfare. But the social consequences of the introduction of this technology was such that it forced a response in terms of an edict from the Roman Catholic Church. Fast forward about 915 years, and we come to a meeting in Geneva in 2011 of a convention called the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. So I was India's DPR on disarmament issues at that time. And we gathered for a 5-yearly review of the convention. And we looked at a number of developments in technology. The synthesis of the Spanish flu virus and a couple of other developments. But no one in the room spoke about CRISPR-Cas9. And this technique for snipping through DNA and taking foreign DNA and inserting it into the host DNA had already been around for about 2 years. So this is something that goes back to 2009. But the best of the brains in the field of biological weapons, biosecurity, did not know about the revolutionary impact of this technology at that time. Let's move on a few more years to what we see is in the headlines today. Autonomous flying vehicles, autonomous driving vehicles. Some years back, if you had asked, what do you think when I say the word drone, we would have normally thought of the figure on the left-hand side, a military drone, because of the use of this weapon system in counterterrorism operations, in conflicts in Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, and other places. Today, if you evoke the same word, you conjure up images of delivery drones, Amazon and others supplying pizza or dropping boxes of supplies, zipline moving blood bags across Africa. The point I'm trying to drive with this is that technology and its impact is socially constructed. Perceptions shift. The questions that we pose around governance of technologies, they shift with the use of these technologies and what are our perceptions of the use of those technologies. To go back to something that was said by the previous speaker. The other point that I'm driving is that governance of technologies, and there was an attempt at governance of the crossbow, didn't work out very well. In fact, it continued to be used on the margins, and the norm broke down after a while, and ways were found to counter the supremacy of the crossbow, and then the arms race shifted on to the next technology. So governance is always trying to keep up with technology. Some years back, we started discussing the issue of the governance of autonomy in weapons systems. When you bring artificial intelligence, systems that learn on the basis of training data into the area of weapons, you start to change some very fundamental things. There has been a distinction between the weapon and the wielder for the longest of times. And there's also been a distinction between what is offense and what is defense for the longest of times. And entire notions of strategic stability, of what accounts for the balance of power, and what should be the laws that govern armed conflict have been based on certain distinctions such as these: a civilian object, a military object, offense, defense, the wielder and the weapon. Now, what happens with the introduction of some of these technologies into the weapons domain is that those distinctions start to break down. And if not break down, they start to become a little harder to understand. We started to see this with the introduction of cyber weaponry, and that is something that's a 21st century phenomena for most, but perhaps we can go back into the 1980s to see the first examples of the use of malware. Now, there you may be trying to attack a military target, but everything is so intermeshed that you don't know what you're finally going to end up affecting. Example, the use of Stuxnet against the uranium centrifuges in Iran, exploiting a flaw in a Siemens control system that was critical to the smooth running of the centrifuges. Although a lot of effort was put in to make sure that the malware only targeted those systems, it did escape, and it ended up damaging some non-intended targets. So this distinction had started to break down already for a while. What happened with the introduction of machine learning, artificial intelligence into weapon systems? And this is still an ongoing process. So no one can really say this is a fully autonomous weapon or not. And perhaps fully autonomous weapon systems don't exist yet, but autonomy is growing in weapon systems. So what happens is that weapon systems can select and engage targets on their own. So if they have learned well enough, they can go out and engage targets on their own. There are limitations, of course, limitations imposed by the laws of physics. How long can a weapon system loiter? At what time do you need to wheel it back to replenish its power source? But within those constraints, there is increasing autonomy in weapon systems. And that poses fundamental dilemmas for the tribe of arms controllers, for international humanitarian law experts, and for military experts. Coming back to the governance question, there was an attempt to look at this aspect from a human rights angle for a few years. And I believe that the human rights aspect is still important. We heard about the death of privacy and the near death of civil liberties. So this aspect of violation of human rights in terms of the extrajudicial executionary aspect of some of these systems, that's there, but perhaps that was not the most fruitful avenue for the governance of these technologies. And therefore, the discussion moved to another forum in Geneva, the Inhumane Weapons Convention, the CCW Convention, which sits at the junction of arms control and international humanitarian law. And I submit to you that these instruments, these areas of practice which sit at the junctions of different fields are going to be increasingly important, and we need to nurture them. Now, what happened over 2 years in this forum was a look at what is actually happening out there, and there's a lot of hype, and there is a lot of snake oil being sold in the name of AI. So we needed to bring the hype down to a more manageable level. And here the media, which is often a purveyor of truth and objective analysis, is not always your friend. You have these notions of killer robots, of terminators and Skynet taking over. So these notions have gone, we might scoff at Hollywood movies, but they have really seeped deep down into our consciousness. So it was important to first navigate that particular terrain. And then also to bring different areas of expertise together. Because for governing emerging technologies to mitigate their negative security consequences, you can't just have one kind of expertise in the room. And this is not easy to do today, where there is hyper-specialization, and it's, again, an ongoing effort. And the third barrier, really, to a good discussion around governance was our mindsets around governance. We become used to certain tools of governance, laws passed by parliaments, treaties negotiated by governments in intergovernmental settings. So certain clear demarcations between what you can and what you cannot. The can, could, cannot, could not questions. But we are not very comfortable with the should or should not questions. The ethical, the principles-based approach to governance. So we need to break some barriers to get to that point. Now, you might say this is escapism, that you're trying to escape the legal domain, which is important for universal application, for clarity in terms of implementation. True. But I think when technology is developing so fast, you looked at the CRISPR-Cas example, you need to try and influence the earlier part of the tech development cycle. And you can't throw law there because you cannot. So you need to have ethical principles, guiding principles that start to influence the development of technology, that the younger generation working for Google and other companies can relate with. And you've seen the revolt of the engineers and other forms of protests or expression of views by the younger generation. So you need to put something out there early that can start to influence and shape the field. And in our discussions, we came up with what was called the sunrise slide, to look at the various points where you could impact the governance of technologies, starting with the pre-research and development phase. So this is where you can have very strong shoulds and should nots. Thou shalt not develop weapon systems that escape the fundamental injunctions of international humanitarian law. And then moving on to the testing and evaluation phase. It's interesting that the civilian industry is grappling with similar kind of issues. How many seconds before a human operator takes back control of an autonomous vehicle? So, and how much time do you allow to lapse before you can get back on to weapons deployment and use loop? And likewise, other aspects of what was described as the human-machine interface. Now, I've given you some recent examples, some historical examples, and I want to conclude by just stating some biases, stating some preferences in terms of the governance of emerging technologies. So I submit to you that first, the governance of these technologies has to be a multi-stakeholder exercise. Private sector has to be part of the discussions, not just governments. And I submit to you that this has to be a distributed, tiered exercise. So there are some things you see with those arrows that perhaps international regulation can take care of. But there are other things that will have to be done nationally, because national contexts are different. The privacy context in Germany is very different from the privacy context in China. And then there are some areas which only you can handle at the industry level through standards, through benchmarking, through the quiet processes that organizations such as the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, do on a day-to-day basis. And finally, I submit to you that this scheme of governance has to be rooted in practice. If it is too abstract, if it is divorced from the practice of these technologies, whether in the civilian domain or in the military domain, then we lose the agility in terms of keeping up to speed with the pace of technological development. There is a lot of interest today in abstract approaches to tech governance. There are 90 plus initiatives around principles for AI. We counted that in the UNSG's panel. So yes, that's very good. But unless we can shape the practice of these technologies in areas like digital health, where I'm focused today, or in agriculture, climate change, we will not be able to get at more than half of the world where these technologies are seen as leapfrogging opportunities in China, Africa, and in India. So if we just focus on the misuse of these technologies and not on the misuse of these technologies by neglecting the practice of these technologies, then our governance approaches would not be sustainable in a global context. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some thoughts, and I look forward to greeting the winners of the prize.
Thank you, Dr. Gill, for that presentation. We will now take a moment to turn to you, the audience. It is now your chance to win a prize, or 3 prizes, I would say. How many of you put your business cards into the pot outside? But I think there's more than that. So just before we pick the 3 different levels of prizes, 3rd place, 2nd place, and 1st place, I would like to let you know what you're winning. So you will all be winning 1, 2, or 3 modules to attend the 2020 Geopolitics and Global Futures Symposium in September 2020. The 3-day course is structured around 3 major topics in the international security field, including the future of outer space security, transformative technologies in the future of global security, as well as neurophilosophy of global security. Now you can see up on the slide here the value of each prize. So I'll let you take that in. It's very impressive. I would like to invite the jury members, so I will venture over to you to help select the winners. That's also very impressive. The 500 franc value to one of the modules. Christian or Gabriel? And finally, for the 1st place, well, 1st prize, there's no places. So congratulations to the three of you. If you can identify yourself, well, come and speak to me afterwards. If you can't find me, one of our colleagues as well can help you. The next part of the evening is the award ceremony. So we are finally going to find out who has won the 2019 Geopolitics and Global Futures Prize for Innovation and Global Security. And without further ado, I would like to welcome back Ambassador Dussey to introduce our jury members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It's my great pleasure to invite a member of the jury to join me on the in front. So we will be there welcoming the prize winner. So first, Lieutenant General André Blattmann, the former head of the Swiss Armed Forces. Thank you. Then Ambassador Nadine Lozano-Olivieri, who is the head of the Security Policy Division of the Foreign Ministry of Switzerland. Then Ms. Lauren Anderson, who is the CEO of LC Anderson Consulting and the former high-level FBI executive. Then I invite also Professor Al-Rodhan to join us, and who will give and tell us who the winners are. And not with us today is Jane Royston. She's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, Swiss entrepreneur, and a member of the Swiss Science Council. But she went under surgery recently, and she cannot join us tonight. Thank you. Nayef, I give you the floor.
Does this work, Ashley? Or should I come to you?
Yes, it works.
Okay. Okay, well, this is what you've been waiting for. After 181 applicants, 15 finalists, we finally have the winner. And the 2019 GCSP Prize for Innovation in Global Security goes to Minefields.info. And I would like to call on stage the two project representatives, Igor Bosic and Ivan Martinic. Want to join the jury? Go ahead.
Great. Can we take a picture first?
Probably should stand.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, jury members. I invite you to sit back down, and over to the two of you for a short speech.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Igor Božić. I come from Zagreb, Croatia. I'm CEO of the firm Bounty. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. My partner and I have developed the application Minefields. I had an idea to develop an application which will warn people about the proximity of minefields, which are a global problem on the world. I gathered a team of the mining men, application developer, web designers, and a lot of other people. It took 18 months to develop the application. I apologize for my English, which could be better. And now my partner Ivan will say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. When we started the project, we told each other, if we save only one life, we reached our goal. Now, when I'm standing here in front of you, I know that our application will save millions of people. I can't describe how it feels good when something that you make can save so many lives. Just incredible feeling. This award is a confirmation that our effort is recognized, that we are doing the right thing, and that we have a really great application. We hope to be able to find a solution to implement the application in all countries in the world that have the minefield problems. The biggest problem is in the poorest countries, where we will not succeed without additional help. Thank you for everything. I hope that we will see you here again, maybe with some new project.
Thank you.
So I will now join them for a short interview here on the front of the tables here. Let's celebrate with them. Let's give them a round of applause. Join you up here. Yeah, perfect. We'll also get your brains working as well. We would like to hear from the audience a few questions in case you have any pressing, questions and ideas. So let's get started.
Okay.
So you have developed an application, Minefields.info.
Yes.
And where was it created? When was it created? And can you explain why you think it has won the prize?
We created for our country.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry. We created for our country where we have problems with the mines. The biggest problem is when someone enters the minefields and they don't know he is in minefields. So we make application who tell him that he approached the minefields before he enters the minefields. And
so the app itself is downloadable for people in which countries?
For now in Croatia and Colombia, and we try to put new countries in the app. We hope to the end of the year we will implement 5 more countries.
In 5 more countries.
Yes.
So what does the app allow you to do at the moment? What features does it include?
At the moment, they show you, warning you that you don't go into minefields. There is the option so you can, if you accidentally enter the minefields, there is SOS call. When someone press that button, geolocation will go to the compass service, and the compass service will send the rescue team to help. Another good thing in the application is education, where people can see the explosive device in some areas and know some relative description about that. If he or she view it in nature, he knows that that is explosive device and do not touch them. Also, is one more functionality, so you can take the picture of some device that you find in nature, and that picture with GPS location will go to the company service, and then the company service will send someone to take care about that subject.
So who is most at risk and who does the app help most, would you say?
I say the most is the most people who goes to the woods. Hikers,
tourists,
of course, tourists,
nature lovers,
and everything like that.
So why did you decide to create the app in the first place? What was the problem where you then created a solution?
we find the problem in Croatia is they are stealing the warning things. And by the Croatian law, the Croatian Mine Action Center need one by year check every table, every warning signs. That's a little bit scary. If someone stole the sign, it could take a whole year to install new one. And in meantime, someone who don't know can go into the minefields. That's a really scary thing. But this is not only in Croatia, this is in every country in the world.
And you're launching it in Colombia as well. Is it fully functional there yet?
It's fully functional, but the Colombia is problem that they don't have the maps in digital shape yet. So we make something different, but we make it work. It's not in 100%, it's in 90% good application. But we will, when they will have the minefields in digital shape, we will put that in the application and everything will work.
So the unique part about your app is that it can be connected offline. And as well, it notifies you based on a regional
because there are no internet signal in the woods.
Right, so, exactly.
So you can in your home download the app, and the app will download all maps in a local database. So you can go in the wood, your mobile can be in your pocket, just walking, and if you are approaching 50 meters to the minefields, you will get the signs loud and everything else.
And does your phone have to be on with the sound on?
No,
it will automatically alert.
Automatically will.
Okay. And if you get close to 50 meters and then to 10 meters, there are different levels,
there are different
right?
levels. 50 meters, 10 meters, and if you enter in the minefield, that's the biggest sound. Then you must stop.
Yes, I would hope so. Well, and you said that actually the app notifies the police or the rescue service of the exact coordinates to rescue someone.
We're talking about in Kromaka about that. The biggest problem when someone's when they are the biggest problem in Croatia. If someone gets stuck in minefields, they don't know where he is. Yes. Because he called the police and say, I'm in wood.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. And the police have to go and rescue them somewhere in the woods, in the minefields.
Police can't enter the minefields. By the law, police can't enter the minefields. That's the problem. And then no one can find them. That's the problem. But with our application, they have exact GPS location and just put into that place.
And my final question to you before we turn over to the audience is, you've won the prize, 10,000 Swiss francs. What do you think you will do with that money? I mean, you can be vague, but...
No, we will improve our application. We have some new ideas about machine learning, ATC, and we will do something like that.
So it will help.
Definitely.
Good, to take it to the next level.
Yes.
Good, very good. All right, does anybody in the audience have any questions?
Yes.
Okay, I have 3 right off the bat. If you could please introduce yourself, and then we will take it one by
I'm
one.
Lauren Anderson. I'm a member of the jury, and I'm also a fellow here at the GCSP. And I want to congratulate you both, first of all, for the win. It's wonderful, and we're super proud of what you're doing. So my question is this. With the minefields, I also see enormous future potential for this app being used to detect improvised explosive devices. So I would like to get your opinion on that, and also if you are willing to share what is a little bit of the technology and the science behind how the app detects that a person is in a minefield. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. We are doing now in application, we're trying to develop machine learning where if some take the picture of some device, machine will recognize it if that is the explosive device or not, and he will get back the information about that subject. I don't understand the question.
Yeah, about the IEDs, improvised
Dice?
explosive devices, and also
Yeah, do
what
you see
you...
potential application?
Of course.
In the future, if
Of
you have the
course.
funds for it?
Of course,
to
we
develop
have.
the app to allow it to be used to detect improvised explosive devices?
Of course. Something like that we are trying to keep, to make. If in some area have a lot of connections, like a lot of submitters of, if users in one specific area take a lot of pictures of some device, the application will recognize that area like danger area, and no other people would come in that area because the application will show them the message. But we have also some ideas in that about ideas.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And we had Ricardo there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ricardo Chavarria, executive in residence at GCSP. And being from Colombia, I'm quite happy to hear that you're using this technology to tackle some of the problems that affect my country as many others in the world.
Yes.
My question goes in terms of the information that is used to identify the regions where there are these mines,
Okay.
as well as taking back from Lauren's question on improvised explosive devices, which is a huge problem in Colombia, where non-state actors are planting these devices, is once the application is used to identify new areas, new minefields,
Okay.
what is done with that information? Is used in the application, is sent back to other organizations to update?
To the company servers, so the company servers, the mining have the whole picture where is the minefields.
And what are the sources of information that you have to create this,
Excuse me?
this map? The source of the information
Okay.
to identify where the minefields are. What is the process of getting this information? If you want to deploy in a new country, what are your sources there? Just to know a little bit how does it work.
When we go to the new country, we take the map from the mining centers and put them in our app. We got the map can be in digital shape or in paper, no matter. We put it in our applications, change some things, and that's it.
Thank you. On to the next question. We had just here in the front. Did you still have a question?
Yes, I just
Yes.
wanted to very close to the one on IEDs.
Okay.
Yes, but just a mutation of the same question. Can it identify, can the application identify like a moving, people who use moving IEDs, you know, you're using it and...
Moving cars, you think?
Moving, like for instance, there are people
vehicles.
who, yes, ID, but in a vehicle, and yes, maybe IDs.
We do, I will tell you, we do some similar project with infrared cameras, with thermal cameras who will detect temperature of the ground. So if there are any deviation, they can check if in the ground something different by the temperature of the mine or device. We have, this is a separate project from this, but we have some ideas and we will work on that. We think it is possible to make something like this. So you put that equipment on your vehicle, Humvee, whatever, you're driving, I don't know, maybe 20 miles per hour, and they will show you if you about 2 meters, 5 meters maximum before review, is there something device under the ground. But this is next step, maybe few years. We'll see again.
Well, I'm not sure how much time we have. We actually do have to wrap it up. So I invite you all who have questions still, I'm very sorry, many of you, but we have to call this interview to a close. I want to thank you all for being here, and especially to the jury members, and congratulations to the two of you and your company and your application for winning this prize. And thank you all for being here this evening. Professor Al-Rodhan, Dr. Gill, Ambassador Dussey, thank you for your contributions this evening. And I invite you to try to catch our winning team out in the foyer just after. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.